Women Up Radio, designed to facilitate women's empowerment, improve your career, develop your talents, incorporate your passions, achieve fulfillment and success.
Hello, this is Women Up Radio, supporting Empower Women, and today we're talking about creative careers and the benefits and challenges that you can face in them, and also the double whammy for older women in the performing arts. I'm joined in the studio by my guest, Jules Bannister, whose career history is a colourful mix of journalism, professional acting and singing, with production work in BBC Radio and the music business in between. Sounds fabulous to me. So welcome to the programme, Jules.
Oh, thank you very much. I'm glad you asked me to join in.
Jules, can I start with your experience in the creative field, journalism, acting, radio, singing, and the music business? Do you think women have good opportunities to progress in their careers?
I think that top of the list would be journalism for progressing in a career, followed by radio and the music business, and actually singing also, basically in that order. The career in acting, which I'll expand on, is a more difficult case. But yes, in that order, I would say those businesses are better for women in career.
Do you think they're more open-minded? Or is it just the sector lends itself better to women?
I don't have any prejudice in that score. I mean, all of them, and you know, the way I feel about feminism and so forth, almost all careers, unless they require one to be built like a builder, are open to women. However, just from my own experience, the acting profession generally, and it's not just for women, but it is a more difficult career to achieve. Yeah. Whereas journalism requires obviously intellect and qualification, and there are a lot of aspects in radio that women can take part in. Likewise, the music business, and of course, it's obvious that women singers are extremely popular. So that's basically my reasons for saying that.
Yeah. So, what professional qualifications or training are needed for these sectors? I mean, can people find work without having to train first and then learn on the job, or do they have to really do something serious?
Well, in terms of qualification, again, things like journalism particularly, and some aspects of radio, there are specific qualifications you can get from university or specific subject, specialising colleges and that sort of thing. In terms of, again, and I'm always separating the acting profession, and hopefully you'll see why. You do train, but there are successful actors who never went to drama school. Therefore, it's not as much of a necessity. So essentially, I think anything that requires intellect and knowledge is better with a qualification. But with acting, it's a completely separate situation. A career in journalism, for example, there are 5 main universities, I found out, that are especially renowned for the communication and media qualifications. There is actually a website called topuniversities.com that provide the names of these universities. And also there's something called the National Council for the Training of Journalists who provide qualifications right from foundation up to a national qualification, which leads to employment, hopefully. And singing tuition, can be done either privately or in places like, music academies and this sort of thing. Again, that slightly relies on talent, obviously. And music business is multifaceted, everything from artist management and, there's a large business aspect to the music business, as well as actually being a performer and a creative. But definitely acting doesn't necessarily need training. There are basic things to learn, but, it can come naturally and quite widespread. And a lot of actors, as I say, are not necessarily trained.
Yes, because, I know I worked in the music business as in entertainment agency.
Right.
I had no experience. It was completely, I was in the right place at the right time, and sort of the business happened. It started because I was married to somebody who was a musician, and
snap.
Oh, really? Right.
Yes, really. My husband's been a musician all his life.
Oh,
there you are.
right. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, my second husband was, and he was more
This one's my third.
Oh, right. God, we are similar, right?
Keep up, Hannah.
I know, I'll have to try again.
Oh, dear.
So with him, I started getting him gigs, and obviously because most of his friends were musicians as well, they asked me to get them gigs. And some of the gigs that I got, the venues started asking me for other musicians. And it was just that. I had no idea about what an entertainment agency should do. I just did what I thought was a sensible thing to do, and it worked. And it was
that's amazing. That's the piece of luck that tends to be a sort of seam that runs through anything connected with show business in itself, i.e. connected with performers of any kind.
Yes.
In that there is an element of luck and, good fortune.
Yeah.
But what you're saying is true in the sense that, again, there isn't any necessary qualification or something you can learn. And in fact, if you spent good money on that type of education where music or acting is concerned, you might have wasted your money because, as you've proven, you can learn as you go along, and it actually, to me, and I think to you, it seems like common sense in some ways.
Yes, because I just did the logical thing of phoning people up, getting people that I thought sounded good, etc., etc. I didn't regard it as trying to enter the music business. I just applied the usual business skills that I'd used in other businesses to that.
Indeed.
But I mean, I was lucky that I knew a lot of musicians because of it. So I didn't find it difficult to find my sources. But so talking more about that, what careers can these different sectors lead to? I mean, obviously we've seen that I managed to make a go of it, but I wasn't trying to. Mine was more, I was approaching from the business end, not the music end. But for somebody that's really into it, all of the sectors we've talked about, I imagine that radio and journalism would probably offer more opportunities, as acting and singing seems to have a limited number of big stars. Although there must be many other behind the scenes careers that people just aren't aware of.
Indeed. I mean, acting, you're right about there being relatively few number of stars. Obviously, the way the media behaves, they're thrown at us all the time. But in actual fact, there is a reason for that, which I'll get on to. But again, the potential for, as I said, for a career and moving along in journalism and radio is easier to follow. In terms of the acting, it's wrong to call it acting, but there are backstage careers of what they call a crew, who literally build sets and this sort of thing. Also lighting, sound, props, costumes, set design. And actually my daughter was a set designer and worked 6 years with the Orange Tree Theatre in Richmond.
Really?
Yes. But unfortunately, due to funding drops, thank you very much, several of them were made redundant. She did try being a freelancer, but of course, that doesn't guarantee an income properly. Although she did get work. So she's actually changed professions now. But did study at university, theatre and film and all the aspects, including set design. Those kinds of things, are, in a way, are more practical, obviously. They don't rely on auditions and that sort of thing. And so they can lead to a career if someone pursues it.
Set design, I've always loved set design. And so do you find the industry has changed much over the years, not just from the aspect of women, but also the way that the sectors work with technology and globalization and things like that?
Yes. I mean, obviously, the obvious thing is that there was there was an era before this, if you like, that the internet didn't exist. And that has drastically changed the nature of everything. Certainly the potential to achieve fame, not always deserved, I have to say, has opened up to anyone anyone. And likewise, globalization has also increased the numbers. Technology hasn't really affected female performance potential, but the behind-scenes workers have had to adapt to learn about new technology, but that's just a practical exercise, really. Improvements in opportunities for women in all professions is very slow, but it hopefully will even out as everyone stands up for gender equality, really.
Thinking about technology, in journalism or in the music business for recording artists?
Yes.
Does that change? Are they
journalism
dying?
No, I mean, I don't think any sectors are actually dying. The music business in particular has had to adapt massively due to downloading and streaming, as they call it. Sometimes, and certainly initially, until they did something about it, they were losing payments, they're losing money, because people, instead of purchasing CDs, they downloaded and so forth. And it did cause loss of profits and also interrupted payment for musicians and songwriters and things. And, the performance industry suffers also from things like drops in government funding.
Yes.
As I was saying, my daughter worked in a fairly well-known off-West End theatre, which lost a large amount of money in funding, and it had to alter the way they had to sort of get funding from private supporters, and I mean they had some funding. They lost such a lot that they had to actually make about 7 or 8 members of staff redundant, which was a shame. So that also, is an influence, whether governments support the arts in general.
Yeah. Do you know if the UK is better or worse or average for government funding for the arts?
I can't swear by it, but I'm sure I've read that we're the best known country for the availability and diversity of entertainment, especially theatre. But different governments are more or less supportive. But I don't have the factual information. But I feel that in the last couple of years, we're less supportive than we should be financially, or rather the government that's in power is less supportive. It could always do with an increase, quite frankly. But I couldn't, give you facts and figures. But
no, I've always had the impression that the UK is one of the best for government funding for performing arts and for culture and the arts in general. But I'm not sure whether I'm just imagining it.
There's a very good atmosphere. I mean, it's a hugely supported subject. Everywhere you read the reviews and the advertising of hugely diverse pieces of writing, really. We call it that, but, plays, films, everything. So it's definitely a cultural country to come to, no doubt about that.
Yes, it's great. I love it. So
yes, I do.
The Royal Opera House.
Oh, wow, yes.
Particularly ballet in the Royal Opera House. But
ballet's gorgeous, but I'm one of these, I don't know how weird, I know I'm weird. My husband and I we're going to the Peacock Theatre tomorrow night to see a show, to see dance shows that, there's one called Soho, which is a mixture of hip hop and circus, flying and all sorts of weird. But I've seen so many big hip hop dance troupes, very well known because Peacock's owned by Sadler's Wells and stuff. I just love all that sort of thing. And there in London and in this country, you can access almost anything that takes your fancy, really.
And not just in London, because I've lived in various parts of the UK as well as other countries. And I've found that wherever I've lived in the UK, and I've lived in the north, the northwest, the west, the east, I've really moved around a bit. And I've found you can get very, very good arts and culture and plays and dance and everything literally all over the country.
It's true. It's quite true. And they, I can tell because of reading, where things are traveling to and so forth, that, as you say, the fantastic things in London will often tour the whole of the UK.
Yeah, exactly.
Everything from bands to dance shows to wonderful plays and so on. And of course, obviously, films are in cinemas all over the place. My daughter's moving to Liverpool, which I hear is a very buzzy place these days.
definitely.
And I'm sure that she won't lack in things to see.
It's great. I mean, I lived up there for 12 years, maybe.
Wow.
Like
God.
And it's always been really good for culture. I think because it was the culture city of Europe or whatever it's called. I think it was that which boosted it on the map, so to speak. But it's always.
Oh, really?
It's
and apparently Hull is now occupying that title.
Exactly. Yeah.
Amazing.
One child on the Wirral next to Liverpool, and the other one in Beverley next to Hull. So,
oh, really?
I have culture. It's wonderful.
Fantastic. Great.
But anyway,
I think that would be a sad lack if that wasn't available.
Oh, I know. Awful. But I mean, I know, just thinking of ballet, because I mean, I'm passionate about ballet. I started ballet when I was 3 years old, and I'm still passionate about it. But
Gorgeous. I love all beautiful dance skills, and I'm quite addicted to watching dance competitions.
Yes.
You know, not in the sense of reality TV. I don't, but just because if you see wonderful talent, it just moves me.
Yeah.
I'm always welling up about wonderful talent.
You are listening to Anna Letitia Cook at Women Up Radio.
Talking about the performing arts and about older women, I get the impression that it's got to be more of a problem for older women in the performing arts, that they have literally a double whammy, being a woman and being old. Am I right, or am I barking up the wrong tree?
Well, let me put it this way. You sent me that question, and I've got on the top of this piece of paper, women stroke old a problem, and then in huge capital letters, yes. There's still a prejudice in TV, for example, about women's age, particularly in things like news reading. And there have been articles and quite a hoo-ha about things like that. And literally, it's something that has to be broken down. And the way to do that is with all these industries, it's about popularity, because popularity equals revenue.
Yes.
So the more popular, for example, an older woman or in any kind of sector of the industry is popular, then the company will back her up. Whereas if they feel that they don't have an audience, they won't. Film is improving slowly. There was recently a film called Elle, as you're in France, you know what Elle is?
Yes.
E-double-L-E. I'm going to forget the actress. However, the central character was a woman in her 50s. She was attractive. She had a sex life, and I won't give the game away, but it's a fantastic. We need more of that, and film is more open, and theatre itself is more flexible than ever, and also not so ageist. Obviously, in theatre there are plays. It does depend on whether the piece carries characters of that age group.
Yeah.
But I have to say that the people who cast things, there's still such an amount of prejudice that they will prefer to cast someone in a younger age group, and age them up, what they call, as in make them look older, rather than actually, because I think they make an assumption that a woman over a certain age looks a certain way, acts a certain way, might not be capable, for example, of doing, let's be blunt here, a sex scene or something like that. There is an enormous sea of prejudice that has to be waded through, really. Obviously, there are marvellous parts, as I've quoted that film, that if someone writes a part like that, they take a chance with it. But obviously, this woman, she's a famous French actress, and it's called Elle. It's fairly recent, controversial in a way. But so the answer is yes, it is a problem. You have to be determined to overcome it. However, you have to try and ignore it and say that, well, whatever that stereotype is, it isn't me.
Yeah.
But you can't force playwrights and screenwriters to write something that depicts an older woman in a different light other than the conventional mum, grandma, neighbour next door sort of thing.
Yeah. Are you thinking of Isabelle Huppert?
Yes, I am indeed. Thank you. I lately forget names, yes.
64.
Fantastic.
I mean,
but the actual character, I think, was meant to be in her perhaps mid-50s, regardless. And if she's 64, it's not. I don't like it when people insinuate that everything is about looks, and the film is not all about looks.
Yeah.
However, it's quite revolutionary compared to the roles that a woman in that, let's call it playing, we call it, it's your playing range.
Yes.
I'm told I don't look my age, so I used to put a sort of 10 years younger playing range, like 45 to 55. Nowadays, I think I'd leave the 45 out of it a little bit. But you really have to play around with it. And actually, a very good example I can give you of an experience briefly is that I went to get some advice when I decided to go back into acting at 51.
Yes.
And I went to see a gentleman, I might call him that, who proceeded to take what they call a headshot photograph out of his drawer of another actress, which was a lady with grey hair, and, you know, how he seemed to expect, and said, if you don't look like this, you won't get work. You need to, you know. Yeah. And I just came away with the usual thing of, well, F you, I'm sorry, but, you know, it's a very difficult job because you have to look and be what the person has in mind when they want to cast someone. And unfortunately, obviously, you enter the audition looking like you, within reason.
Yes.
You'll always tone it down or up according to what they're looking for. But at the end of the day, if you don't look like what they expect you to look like, and maybe act like as well, you haven't got a chance.
So from that, for someone who's producing a film, for instance, what are their main criteria and what do they look for in their cast? Is it the names? Is it an image? Is it what type of criteria do they work to?
Well, on the top of the list above image and so forth is, again, profit. And what that actually entails is that if they don't use it, and I was told this only recently, but I know it, I already knew it. If they don't use big names, this is particularly what they call feature films.
Yes.
If they don't use big names, they feel they won't make the revenue because it won't attract people. If it's someone no one's heard of, that takes it down a notch in their mind. Obviously, they care about storylines, what they call with wide appeal, you know, romance, tragedy, sex, glamour, comedy, that sort of thing. But essentially, they want big names in feature films to attract an audience and get their money back, essentially, for investing in it.
Yes.
In independent films with smaller budgets, there is more room for creativity and actually letting controversy in a subject that just might be too touchy, but they'll make it, on a much lower budget.
Yeah.
But essentially, their casting criteria starts with who will attract the most bums on seats, as they call it. Yeah. Which is a very hard barrier to cross, obviously, for all these would-be actresses and actors too. But it is, I do think it's slightly more difficult for women.
Yeah. We hear, looking in the news and things like that, and when you've got the Oscars and all of the awards in Cannes and everything, always after that we get some of the leading female stars talking about how unfair the industry is, how the pay is different, how the roles aren't there, etc. So how do you think opportunities can become more gender balanced in the industry? Where does it need to start? What level, basically?
Well, I like to feel that this gender balance thing is a global issue.
Yeah.
There are performers in all different walks of life and different countries in the world. They have to constantly achieve a platform and publicity. And of course, with things like social media, they can say how they feel about it. They have the greatest part to play, really, social media and that sort of thing.
Yes.
And it boils down to the fact that writers need to become bolder and adventurous when they create female characters. There's got to be a way somehow of convincing the industry, i.e. film and theatre, or as I say, theatre is a slightly easier genre, and it's a slow process, really. It's a slow burn. It's a global issue. It's the more famous people speak up about the inequality, especially in payment, of course.
Yes.
Again, and if only a name sprang to mind, but the lady that played the TV series Medium, Patricia Arquette, she is a huge champion of gender equality in payment and generally. like everything, the suffragettes had to suffer, and it's going to take time and a slow change. Yes. But I think it will happen.
Yeah. So if the writers start first, it's going to help everybody else. Because
yes.
the women that are in there, then the more producers have got to actually follow through. So
yes, exactly. And especially, of course, well-known writers, because they have the edge,
Yes.
People like J.K. Rowling and all the other sort of people who've had success with writing, and maybe turn their hand to, well, of course, a screenwriter, as far as I can gather, would take a book and adapt it as a film.
Yes.
That sort of thing works well, because, of course, thousands of people have already read it. So
yes. For anyone who really wants to improve their options in the creative sector, have you any tips?
Well, I would say, and this is more, it's a lifelong and lifestyle thing, but self-esteem, I'm a big champion of the fact that self-esteem, or lack of it, is responsible for how a woman thinks. It's more of it does exist in male, young children and so forth, but with women especially, it's not so long ago that women were taught being meek and mild and pretty and that sort of thing, and not interfering and not being
yes.
feisty was the way to go. Yep. Whereas really, you need self-esteem, you need confidence, and you have to refuse to accept sexism and ageism. This goes throughout all industries.
Yes.
But also, I have found a willingness to be flexible regarding their career paths and open some doors that maybe might not have been their initial ambition, but they can use their skills and talents and have fulfillment another way. For example, if they find that the acting profession doesn't produce results over a really long period of time, obviously you have to persist, but